Way to go, Tic Tac!
That's how you punch.
Wakanda forever!
Nah, you wouldn't have heard of me.
Let me put you on hold.
Dance off, bro! He's a friend from work!
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to the channel. This is, again, not another movie review. I just uploaded the New Year's special, which I'm not even the proudest of it, but I thought it was better than nothing. But this I am excited for because I'm kind of revamping the number 1 through 50 recap that I did a while back. If you guys see it, it was very boring. It was 45 minutes long and not worth the watch. So I was trying to come up with something more interesting to do for each 50 movies that I review. So I came up with the Essential Aspect Awards. So I'm going to be giving out, for each essential aspect that I go over in all my reviews, I'm going to be giving out an award to the movie that did it the best, or also an honorable mention. And just to be clear, each movie can only be on here once. So there's movies that are really good in acting and dialogue and plot, but I just have to choose something that they did the best so that there's a chance that I can put other movies up there as well. Because I have a few movies on here that can be honorable mention and first in many different categories, and it would be pointless to upload. So that's just a big heads up, just so that no one gets mad if they see a movie that clearly there's other movies I've done that have a better plot, which is why I'm saying it. But I just think that the other movies are better in other categories, so they deserve that award more than others. So enough of me rambling, let's just get right into the awards. The first essential aspect is plot. So plot is just story. It's what the story is in the movie, the characters that develop within, and how to make the audience get engaged or interested in the story that you have created. And in the honorable mention slot, I have Deadpool from 2016, a movie that did really well, especially when it came to origin stories, which the origin story is part of the plot, which makes sense why it's in here. But I just think it's done really well. I think it did a really good job of developing Wade Wilson into Deadpool, into even more afterwards. So as origin stories go, really well done, which means, of course, it's going to be good in plot. And the plot award goes to Logan, which was from 2017. It did an amazing job wrapping up such a big character that's been in so many movies. They had to do it well in order to really engage the audience more, because if you keep seeing the same character pop up on screen, it could get boring. It could get less interesting just because you've seen him so many times. You've kind of seen everything he can do. But because of this particular point of view with an aged Logan in the future, seeing him not really be able to use his powers as well as before, bringing in new characters, the story itself was really good. And that part is why it's going to get this award, because it knew how to engage the viewers. It knew how to wrap up a character in a very specific way, really the only way you could have wrapped up Wolverine. So I'm glad they did it that way, and that's why they deserve this award. The second essential aspect is attraction. Now, attraction can be two things. It could be entertainment, and it could be interest. So when it comes to the entertainment, that is going to be straight up comedy, anything that's funny and get a laugh out of the audience. But also it could be interest, where the concept is very interesting, is very well thought out, and can engage the viewers that way. So a movie that did this well in the honorable mention spot is Spectral. I think the concept behind that movie is what made me want to give it the honorable mention. I think it's really interesting, and I spent the entire movie trying to really figure out what these spectrals could be. And because of that, I think it deserves honorable mention. Obviously, it's not as big of a concept as some of other movies, which is why it's only in the honorable mention spot. And the attraction award goes to Inside Out from 2015. Now, when I first saw this movie, I thought it was the coolest, most creative thing I've ever seen. Even though, obviously, now there's a lot of creative stuff, but I still am a strong believer that Inside Out has such a cool concept. I think being able to make a whole world inside just someone's mind that's always different depending on who the person is, I think that's very creative, very smart, and a concept that I do like thinking about. I sometimes like thinking about seeing like what would my characters be in my head when it comes to all my emotions, and did I act out this way because of something in my head? So these different concepts that come with this movie is why I put it up here, along with the comedy it has. I do think some of the things are funny in the movie, which helps because now both categories in attraction are checked off, which makes it worthy of getting this award. The third essential aspect is theme. So theme is the message or truth that a movie is trying to convey to the audience through the screen. And it is a hard thing to do unless it's blatantly obvious and mentioned in the movie, like specifically a character is saying to a character the theme of the movie, then yeah, it can clearly be told by anyone. But in a lot of times, it's very subtle and you have to be looking for it to really get it, which doesn't, that's better, I feel like. That's better if it's like that in movies. But it's what makes it hard to kind of get movies in this category to get this award because not everyone has a theme that makes sense. So in the honorable mention slot, I have The Fall Guy. That one was a blatantly obvious one because it even said at the beginning of the movie that the whole theme and message behind this movie was in honor of stuntmen because they don't get enough credit for all their stunts and everything. They're kind of on the back row. While this movie the main focus of this movie was the stuntmen. So that's why I think it at least deserves the honorable mention spot. But the theme award does go to The Breakfast Club from 1985. And that movie is just done really, really well. And I think the message behind each individual character and the struggles that they go through in their whole life is really the key of this movie. Without that theme, the movie isn't nearly as good. So it was an obvious choice for me when it came to theme. I couldn't think of any other movie that I did in that first 50 that would make sense to get this award besides this one. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. Now, dialogue is all about the conversations between characters. Do the conversations feel real? Because if the conversations don't feel real, it's going to pull you out of the movie. It's not going to be as enjoyable of a watch. And I also feel like dialogue can also be about specific way of talking during the movie. Like, for example, in my honorable mention, Megamind. Now, the conversations feel real to a point. Not all of them, because it is a comedy movie, so sometimes it's supposed to be more funny than real. But I think the way that Megamind himself mispronounces absolutely every easy word to say under the sun, specifically because he wasn't raised normally. He dropped down directly into prison, never got to learn real vocabulary. So when he saw the word school, he automatically assumed it was shul. And I think that is just a creative way of introducing dialogue into this movie because it really does depend on where the ship lands. I mean, Metro Man landed in a nice mansion. He got the best schools. He knows how to speak perfectly. But of course, Megamind doesn't. So I just think that's a really cool piece of dialogue and why I included it in the honorable mention slot. But the actual award of dialogue has to go to Good Will Hunting from 1997. Oh my goodness, do these characters know how to be real. I was so invested in this movie while watching it. Now, this movie isn't meant to be entertaining. It's meant to have a very good concept with incredible acting and a story to bring upon the audience. And I think this movie did everything really well, which is why it could get the award for a lot of these different categories. But I had to choose the best one, and I have to say that is definitely going to be the dialogue for this movie because it's just phenomenal between the two main characters. Everything that they say to each other feels like an actual conversation had by two people. And the ending, the dialogue is really the biggest reason why that is such a good ending. So that was a no-brainer for me. It clearly deserves the award. The fifth essential aspect is acting. Now, acting is obvious. It is about the actors and actresses and how they portray their character. How well do they portray them? Not necessarily how realistic they are at being that character, but how well they portray them, because it doesn't always have to be realistic. It can be animated. It can be cartoony. It doesn't have to look real, but it still has to be done well. So that's obvious to me. And the honorable mention is Speak No Evil from 2024. James McAvoy did a phenomenal job in that role. He was the main reason why the movie was so good. I feel like if they chose a different actor who didn't do it as well, the movie would have probably flopped. I think the concept was really interesting, but it was done so well by James McAvoy that it made it even more interesting. So that is the real reason why I gave it honorable mention. And the only reason it didn't actually get the award is because the movie that gets the acting award is Joker from 2019. Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is not my favorite Joker, but it is definitely one of the best acting performances I've seen in a long time. Not ever, but in a very long time. I mean, he improvised so often in this movie, And every time he improvised, it made the movie 10 times better. The scene where he I always mention this whenever I'm talking about this movie. The scene where he punches the clock until it falls off the wall is such an iconic scene to me from that movie. And that wasn't even in the script. He just fully engulfed himself in this character of Arthur Fleck. He just decided, you know what? I'm not acting anymore. This is just going to be me. And he just punched the clock until he broke his hand and just moved on with his merry way because he thinks that's something that the Joker would do. And that, one reason, is why it's getting the award. Because the depths he went to just to make this character feel so real, he deserves an award in himself. Not even the movie, but him. So that's why they deserve the acting award. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. Now, cinematography is about two things. It's about the way the movie looks and the way the movie makes you feel. The emotions and the visuals. Those are the two main things when it comes to cinematography. For the honorable mention, we have Redline from 2009. That does not have much emotional value to me, but the style that the movie has for visuals is very, very good. I loved this style. I hate anime, usually. I do not like it. I cannot get myself into it. Maybe it's just because of the shows, but I despise it. But this movie, even though I was hesitant to watching it because it is anime, I actually really liked it. And I think that's because the goofy anime physics that kind of happen in these TV shows and movies made more sense with the plot that this movie had because it was racing. So when someone gets stretched out, it makes sense. They're going like 300 miles per hour. Of course, it's going to look like they get stretched out. It just made sense, which is why the visuals looked so good in this, especially since they were hand-drawn. So I just think visually this movie was very appealing, and that's why it deserves the honorable mention spot. And the award for cinematography goes to Smile 2 from 2024. Now, the visuals were pretty good. That's not the real reason why it deserves this award for me. For me, it's the way that it made me feel. It's the emotions. Now, scared is little said for this movie. I hate jump scares, but they don't honestly scare me. I don't think that's what makes a good horror movie. I think the ambiance and the way that the movie makes you feel throughout the whole thing is a good horror movie. And Smile 2 did that. I had goosebumps. I felt like I had heart palpitations during some of the scenes because of the soundtrack, because of the scenes in general, and just the whole, I don't know why. It's just the whole ambiance that the movie had in theaters. I was panicking. Not scared, but I was panicking. Like I actually had heart palpitations. So that, hands down, has to be the award because I've never had another movie do that to me. I've watched scary movies. I get jump scared here, I get kind of scared here, but I've never had something affect me during the whole movie. So award is clear in my eyes. The seventh essential aspect is editing. Now, editing is all about the pacing of the movie. I think, mainly at least, it's all about the pacing of the movie. How well does it get from point A to point B, and does it make sense while it's doing it? So, in honorable mention, I have a Ghost Story from 2017. I think this movie did that specifically really, really well. It's very average for the rest of the movie, but the editing I have to give it credit for because it starts and ends on the same scene. And they built the movie so well in a very specific plot line to make sense when it wraps all the way around full circle. So, I mean, that's just the credit it deserves. It deserves the honorable mention spot. It didn't do anything too fantastic otherwise, but that's why I at least wanted to shout it out here. And the editing award goes to X-Men Days of Future Past from 2014. I think it's very hard in a time travel movie to jump between present and past or present and future, and it just flowed really, really well in this movie. I think the pacing of the movie is what saved it. It could have been a mess if it didn't do it really well. If you didn't know what time period you were in ever, it would be an absolute disaster. But thank God in this, it made it clear, it made it precise exactly where you are and when, so you don't get lost in the plot, and it knew how to do it correctly. So that's why it's getting the editing award. Nothing spectacular when it comes to editing in either of these, but I think that is the thing that they did the best. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. Now, soundtrack, obviously, the soundtrack of the movie. I don't really know how else to explain what soundtrack is. But either way, the two that I have chosen here for honorable mention and the actual winner of the awards have a good soundtrack. Honorable mention, less so. But still, I just haven't watched a lot of movies in the first 50 that have a soundtrack that's very memorable. Now, honorable mention, I have Joker, Folie à Deux, which really the only reason it's in the honorable mention spot, because I don't like that movie. It's not the best done. I feel like it's the only musical I've watched, so it's the only soundtrack that I still can kind of remember. So just for that reason, strictly, it deserves the honorable mention spot. Otherwise, it doesn't have something special going for it. It's not like the songs were really catchy. There was a few that I enjoyed, but after those few were come and gone, the rest did not need to be there. So it's really just a pity honorable mention. And the actual soundtrack award goes to Rush Hour, because that does have a memorable soundtrack. I do remember that soundtrack well. I can visualize the scenes where each song is playing in, just because it was a good choice for sound. So that's really the only reason. I don't really know what else to explain in soundtrack. It's just if the soundtrack was memorable or not, and this one was, so it deserves the award. The ninth essential aspect is directing. Now, obviously, when I'm talking about directing in my reviews, I'm talking about the specific director, their history, and did they deserve to be able to be the ones to make this movie, and do they deserve to continue to make movies? Now, that's not what I'm going to be talking about in this. I'm really going to be talking about, obviously, directing has to do with all of the other essential aspects that I've previously mentioned. So really, it's going to be a healthy mix of all of them, but also how difficult it must have been to direct a movie like this. I think that's really what it's going to be. So in honorable mention, I have Inside Out 2. Now that I just think is an overall well-done movie. It doesn't suck in any category. Obviously, it doesn't have to be perfect in every category. It is. It's really good. It's almost up there with Inside Out, the original one. But because it doesn't really fail in anything, I think it deserves the honorable mention spot. And the actual award for directing goes to 127 Hours, which came out in 2010. And that's because the style that the movie is brought in, it's really hard to, it's really hard to come up with an interesting plot line and engage, ways to engage the audience, because it's all in one spot. He's stuck in that cave for the entire movie. So the fact that they had so little wiggle room with what they can show in the movie came out good. They knew how to attract the audience, even with just the simple plot of him getting stuck in a cave. That's really what the plot is. If you want to boil it down, in that movie, man gets stuck in cave. That's the movie, and they made it really good. They made it intense. They made me feel emotion. They made it look good. So overall, again, well done with a more difficult task to complete. So that's why I think it deserves the award above, for example, Inside Out 2. And the 10th essential aspect is time. So obviously when I'm talking about time, I'm talking about, does it stand the test of time? Both these movies obviously are older, because it can't stand the test of time if it just now got released. So in the honorable mention, I have Batman from 1966. I mean, it is 59 years old. Hell of a run. And I'm really putting this, because I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. I don't think it's a great portrayal of Batman, but obviously that is not in my generation. The comment section of that review very nicely told me that they still love this movie. They think it is a really good portrayal of Batman. Of course, depending on your age gap, your generation, you will see a different Batman and you will like a different Batman. That's always how I knew it. So, but I think, especially since that generation still watches it, according to my comment section, it definitely stood the test of time, especially since it's 50, almost 60 years old. So that is the real reason why I put it in the honorable mention. But the actual award of time goes to Toy Story from 1995. Oh my goodness, 30 years old this year now. So that movie 100% stood the test of time. I remember watching it as a kid. It is still just as good watching it now, and it is really the milestone of animation when it comes to movies that are now animated by Disney, by Pixar, by DreamWorks. All of these movies really had a staple to go off of, which is Toy Story. So without a doubt, it stood the test of time better than a lot of movies have, and that is why it deserves the award. That's all I have for the Essential Aspects Awards. If you guys enjoyed this kind of format, I'm going to be doing it every 50 movies. So once I record my 100th review, I'll be doing the same thing for movie reviews 51 through 100. So if you want to see that, stay tuned. I'm at almost 70 now, so we're about 30 videos away, but we will get there. So let me know if this is the kind of style that you'd want to see in the next one, or if I should kind of change it up. Let me know. I hope you guys have an amazing night. Peace out.